I feel like if you just try to repress things often, it usually kind of backfires.
I'm really excited today to be speaking with Kourtney Roy, the director of Kryptic. Kourtney, thank you so much for the time. I really do appreciate it. Kryptic is a fascinating and wild ride. What excited you most to tell the story? Where did it come from?
Ah, where did the story? I mean, like I said, with sitting down with Paul, the writer, because he was very, very, very open to like collaborating and making, writing a script that he would tailor to my taste and my, things that I'm interested basically in talking about working with. Because I've for over 20 years I make my living as a photographer, photographic artist, so I have a very strong visual universe already quite kind of in place. And I mean, I was just, for me, it was kind of I didn't have like a specific story. I mean, Paul had more of an idea of what sort of story that he was going to, but with identity, searching for identity and mistaken identities and all this stuff. This came from him. But obviously, I thought, I was totally fine with that. I thought it was amazing, and it was more like, I wanted to I wanted a story that took place in Canada in the mountains. I wanted, a lot of my photographic work is like, old motels and dive bars and just kind of like vernacular architecture of the world that has a bit of a nostalgic sort of tinge to it, let's say. So it was really kind of more wasn't I didn't have a grandiose overarching idea. It was more like these are things that I'm interested in. Here's the list of them, Paul, and then Paul would take them and sort of wonderfully sort of go through them and weave them into his story, when he wrote.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned about being a photographer there because one of the things about this film I think is so fascinating is visual sensibilities. Like it feels like in any difference, every scene has a different visual context. It's a bit of a road movie, if you will.
Yeah, it is
Um,
definitely a good movie. Yeah.
yeah. So what went into your mind as you were helping to develop the visual look of a film like this? Because it's such a unique experience.
I mean, yeah, I think, for one, I'm not a very experienced filmmaker. It's my first feature. I don't come from a cinema background, but I will say that even from my photography background, I'm very, very, um, very good in locations. That's kind of my thing. I'm sense of place, setup, setting, all that stuff. Um, that is something that is kind of, which for me, gives is key for atmosphere, for giving an ambience to the work, right? So, for me, it was a no-brainer, like, small town, Canada, the mountains, all these aesthetics are things that I already really love. And it was just a question because we were not a huge budget film, we weren't creating sets or making sets. We had to kind of go and find
Mm.
places, houses, bars, hotels that were already pre-existing and already kind of had like a basic sort of decor already in place, and that so that you know the production designing crew could come in there and just more like tweaking than actually revamping everything. So yeah, it was just like a lot of scouting, which I really enjoy. Like I said, I think it's something I really think is really fun. I think I'm pretty good at it. I'm pretty good at like sussing out places, finding out of the way places. Obviously, then we had like an amazing locations team on there who obviously you know made my life so much easier because they would just go and show me, find me stuff, and I just had to choose. So
Yeah, well, like I said, each aspect or each segment of this film looks so visually unique from the next. I think that's really one of the more fascinating parts of it. The final scenes in the home don't look anything like the scenes in the bar or out on the it's really well done. Um, let's talk about Suca. Uh,
Suca.
Suca. This is a really interesting way to look at a monster, but I mean, we do see Suka in some ways. But as you were processing what you wanted Suka to be, what was most important to you to bring out about this particular monster?
Um, I mean, Paul and I created this monster because we thought it'd be more interesting to work with a monster that we just kind of created out of nothing instead of a pre-existing monster that comes with its own set of sort of rules and baggage, let's say. So I guess it was important that this creature is not. it's not a cryptid in the sense that it's just an animal that lives in a forest that we just haven't been able to get scientific proof. It's an interdimensional being. So that was important that, and it's, as mentioned early on in the film, so I'm not giving it away, somebody describes it as a sort of a shapeshifter, right? And it can change forms. So its elusive nature was very important, and the fact that it's not like a creature that attacks you and physically harms you. It doesn't, it's more like it fucks with you, it messes you up. Suka's gonna mess you up mentally.
I think it's in the script. It says Suka thrives on all kinds of crazy energy,
Yeah, yeah,
and it does.
yeah, definitely does.
I wondered about, like, one of the things about any great sci-fi and great horror is the meaning of the monster, and this Suka is such a fascinating beast. I was wondering if in the development of Suka you were wrestling or you asked the question about whether or not we all have a monster in us that's waiting to be unleashed.
I mean, this. I think I don't know if we would call it necessarily a monster. We all have our unself.
Hmm.
We have ourself the self that we're not the most proud of, or the self that we question its motives, and the self that the one that makes us cringe, or that we repress a lot because it's parts of ourselves that we don't make us maybe feel bad or guilt or whatever, that it's not. So I think but it's also, that part of it, but there's also, a sort of a link for me with it's maybe this repressed energy that whether societal, culturally, all these things, that have made us feel like these parts of us we need to repress and subsume underneath, this other part of us that we kind of show to the world. So there's a sense of liberty and freedom, like it's a road movie, and the road movie is, encapsulates this idea of the unexpected, the unknown. Nothing's predictable, and that's what's so lovely about a road trip, is that it gets you out of the everyday. So there's, this I associate actually this kind of maybe our inner monster or our unself with also the senses of it, liberty, openness, so things, anything can kind of happen, the sense of the unexpected. So yeah, so yeah, inner monsters, like, not necessarily, the ideas of good and bad, I guess, are human constructs, and the Suka is not. It's not subject to moral codes of the human race, right? It's whatever it is as being, it has its own logic in its own way. And maybe the idea of even something that's good or bad doesn't even exist. It's just more that things are action and reaction, cause and effect.
That is fascinating, and I love that you said that because one of the things I think about this film too is the toxic nature of boxes. Um,
Boring God. Not you, I meant there's it's so boring. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, what
I fight all the time. I mean, fight gently. Obviously, I'm not angry, but yeah, people in my photographic work, they're like, "So your work is like this? It's a feminist work." I'm like, "No, nothing wrong with feminist films. This is not a feminist film, but it's like feminist male toxicity and feminist like film, horror." I'm like, Paul and I we're not thinking about that at all. Like Paul definitely was not thinking about that. He just wanted to tell the story anyway.
no, well, this is exactly what was wondering about because, like you said, this isn't necessarily a feminist film. It's certainly female empowering in parts, but it's not necessarily driving for that. But it is, and I was, what sorts of conversations were you and Paul having as you were developing this? Because it is a really interesting sort of battle with the idea of convention, I found.
Yeah, I mean, I think more the themes for me were not male toxicity or revenge against men at all. This is a film where the protagonist, the main character, is a woman, but I also, Paul said I'd like to have a female led lead driven the narrative, and I said, yeah, that sounds good because as a woman, I think I'm capable of telling a story from a female perspective, but it's not about actually, but it's just by default because so she has these relationships, these toxic relationships. They're not very healthy. But then also it's about toxic masculinity. I'm like, no, it's just she's in toxic relationships, but she happens to be heterosexual. So the people she's in toxic relationships are men by default again, But it's actually not about men. It's about it's more about we're thinking of identity, freedom, convention, the forest. Themes of actually like the forest is scary. There's a monster, but you know what's even more scary? The domestic realm. Like that would maybe be like my take if there was any sort of social sort of not want to say criticism, but like, viewpoint is that terror of the domestic home and like basically doddering, sort of flaccid, insipid life, just kind of sitting there in your suburban home, being married and supposed to have children and all that stuff. That for me sounds terrifying. And I'm pretty sure Paul would be absolutely horrified by that as well, so.
Well, I don't want to say too much, but that scene in the garden, uh,
Oh,
it was
oh,
like,
yeah, that's a fun
oh
scene.
man.
Oh, but yeah, this was not all political. Like we laugh because I think Paul and I just find children hideous. So, so, but that's just for as personally, So Paul and I have a lot of themes that we kind of that we meet on together. So that's why it was such a great collaboration. So we always thought it was just funny, like that this woman would be kind of sort of horrified by the thought of having children. We had a lot of laughs. Like this wasn't coming from a place of anger or resentment. A lot of the scenes where people are like, oh my God. When Paul was writing them and showing me and working on it with them, we just laughed a lot. We just had a lot of fun. Like this is going to be so awkward. It's going to be so weird. They're going to find that really creepy, and then ha ha ha, and then he go away and write. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There is that balance between awkward, creepy, and funny at the same time.
yeah, that's definitely something we were going for. So I'm glad you felt that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Thinking of the monster, if you will. I was wondering about the idea of embracing it. You talk about freedom there, but there's sort of this sense of embracing the monster
Yeah, yeah.
and what that means to you.
I mean, embracing the monster is kind of. I think it's just well, it's there anyway. So embracing it, or I feel like if you just try to repress things often, it usually kind of backfires. Things explode, right? Things getting bottled up. So a sense of embracing and be more, an acceptance of also of this darker side of us, right? It doesn't mean that you have to let it have free reign all the time, but through acceptance and through recognition of it, I think that it makes it more manageable or more palatable, maybe, for it's kind of like, it's like a really basic sort of superficial comparison. Like, we're like, I'm going to go on a diet. I'm never going to eat a piece of chocolate again. Well, about a week later, you're going to go to the store and buy like all the chocolate bars or something, or like, like buy the worst because you've just been like refusing it. But if you give yourself a little piece of chocolate once in a while, I'm like, that's okay. And kind of able to like, create a bit more of a balance for yourself. I mean, everybody's different, of course. I'm just thinking of me. If I said to myself, like, don't ever do that again, I know 2 weeks later I'm going to be doing that
Yeah.
again. So.
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand. Yeah, that's a great point. Listen, Cryptic is a fun, it is wild ride. Do you have anything that you hope audiences take away from the film?
I no, there's nothing really to take away from it. I think everybody's going to bring their own experiences and baggage and whatever else we have with this, to it, and that's actually the more fascinating component of once you make a film and it's out there. It doesn't really matter what my or Paul's intentions were anymore because nobody cares. You know what I mean? Like it's a film now. People are just going to experience it. So I hope that actually people just had a wild, fun ride, and that even though it was a strange and can be a sometimes confusing film that's mysterious, I hope they like just felt like they wanted to keep going the whole time. I hope they were just highly entertained, and I hope it just kind of got some juices flowing and some questions um that some questions were asked but never answered.
Yeah, yeah, no, I appreciate that. And when you think about really all forms of art, it's something that you make, but then you sort of release it, and it's sort of
Yeah,
like,
you gotta let it go. You can't control it anymore. I was talking about like there's nothing wrong with feminist filmmaking. In fact, there's a place for everything, and there's incredible work. But I'm always like, Paul and I even joke about. I'm like, oh my god, every review's like, oh, feminist, ultra feminist, revenge movie, and I'm just like, oh, I never said that once. And you're like, me neither. I'm like, okay, well, that's just you gotta nothing you can do about it. It could be worse. So
Courtney, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. The
yeah,
film.
no problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks.